Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back once again to the only coast to coast radio show all about the information economy. It's called Inside Analysis. Yours truly, Eric Kavanaugh here. And we have an all star cast lined up for you today, folks. And there's a bit of a personal story on this particular show that we're doing. It's going to be featuring some folks from FPT, which is a company out of Vietnam, an absolutely fascinating company out of Vietnam. I went and visited them last year, as did one of the other guests on the show today. Harold Sinnott is with us from Tech Ahead. We'll be talking to him in just a minute. But we went over to Vietnam for several days to really absorb the culture of the country and learn more about the company, FPT. And it is absolutely fascinating. This company is really very interesting. It started off focused on food. So a bunch of scientists went to their get their doctorates. They went up to Moscow. I think there's over a dozen of them, 15 or 16 as I recall. And they went and got their PhDs. And this is like in the early 1970s, I want to say. And they came back to Vietnam. They looked at each other. They said, we got to do something to help our country. So they started this company, FPT. It originally stood for Food Processing Technology because they focused on the basics first, and it's since evolved. And my goodness, has it ever evolved? Now they have a huge telco presence. They have a software division. They've got universities. They run apparently the top university in Southeast Asia. So these folks are thinking big, they're thinking wide, and the work ethic is absolutely fantastic. So the show today is basically titled after the motto of Vietnam: independence, liberty, happiness. The Silicon Delta thrives. So we're going to talk with several guests, like I mentioned, Harold Sinnott, of course, from Tech Ahead. We'll also hear from Garth Hamilton of FPT and Scott Liniado, who is with Cox Automotive. And you know what? Customer is always right. So the customer goes first. So I'm going to throw the first questions over to Scott. You've been working with FPT, I believe, since the COVID era and had to onboard 1,000 people or something like that during those times, and you had a fantastic experience. Tell us about your take on the Silicon Delta.
Yeah, so I am pretty new to working with Vietnam. We started in 2020, and we were consolidating down from 200, partners down to just a few, down to three at Cox Automotive in our product
Wow.
group, which pretty big project. We kicked it off before COVID, but like as COVID was happening, we selected our final partners, and it was just a crazy thing to say, okay, we're going to onboard this many teams, this many people, without meeting them because I'm used to going out. I worked a lot with India, and I've been out to India to Delhi area 4 different times, and I've never been to Vietnam. I never met the people there, and we went in head first, brought on all of these teams who were over 1,000 people pretty quickly, and it wasn't until 2022 when I actually went out there and visited. But I'll kind of share with you the experience. I thought it would be something similar to what I'd experienced in the past. Like, okay, well, maybe some lessons from India will apply here. But it was completely different culture, wonderful people, just an amazing young talent coming out of their schools. So you mentioned FPT University. I've had the privilege to go down and visit the campus. And when I talk to folks about FPT University, they are like, "Oh, you have a nice internal training program." They all have some kind of university. I'm like, "No, it's actually like the top private university." They're like, "Oh, an actual, like, yeah, like a 4-year college with master's programs, the whole bit." It was amazing to tour the campus and see what they're doing, but to know that they have a large percentage of that talent going directly into our programs. And then you see, a floor for Cox Automotive built out. We have
Wow.
our folks in Ho Chi Minh. You walk in, there's a big Cox Automotive sign. There's signs for our teams. But I don't, it's just wonderful people, wonderful talent, and also young and innovative ideas.
Yeah.
I've been told at one point that the average age of the folks on our project was like 27, which you really get some diversity of thought from both bringing in that young talent, but also just from being in another region of the world.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I noticed, and I was there when they christened, I guess, this university. It was a really fun experience. And I was talking to some of the students, and if I recall correctly, all students take music, some kind
Mhm.
of music. All students take music. And I thought that was very interesting because in the liberal arts mindset, you want to learn a lot of different things, in part to find out what you want to do for your life, right? So if you do lots of different things, you learn discipline, you learn how to create, how to collaborate. And certainly with music, you must collaborate. I mean, you can be a solo singer, for example. You're not going to get a whole lot of work if you just sing by yourself all the time. No, you need to have a band, you need to work or an orchestra. I was very impressed by that. And I was very impressed with, again, the work ethic and the attitude. It was very positive. It was very focused on getting things done. And everyone, you drive around where we went, and you see all the people on their mopeds, whatever. No crashes. Somehow, some way, I didn't see any crashes, despite 18 wide on these streets going down the road. But very focused, very studious, very hardworking. Is that your impression too?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, one of the first visits when I came in, they did an innovation day. So I went in, there's a big stage, big screen set up, and they actually opened up with a karaoke number for the meeting. I kid you not. It was Bon Jovi, It's My Life. I will not forget it. But the the culture of innovation, the excitement from the team members, and just knowing like they actually do this on a quarterly basis. We've got these innovation days. They come with fresh ideas from the team, present us, who wins. They have prizes for them. It's just a lot of excitement, and you can kind of feel it when you go visit.
Yeah, that's great stuff. I'll throw it over to Garth Hamilton to comment on. Of course, you're here stateside, but you've been working with FPT for about 8 years, I think you said.
Correct.
And there are cultural differences. There's no doubt about that. But I was very impressed by, like I say, this very focused culture. Get things done, get into the office. It's almost like America used to be like 20, 30 years ago before it went all like business casual and Silicon Valley took us in all these different directions. But I don't know, I'm getting a bit philosophical there, but what are your thoughts, Garth, and what brought you to FPT?
So I mean, let's go back to culture. Certainly deeply entrepreneurial. We are now a fairly large company. The mothership's about 2.5 billion in revenues. Software is just over one, but the entrepreneurial culture stays. It's not hierarchical at all. The titles and the levels don't matter. It works as a cohesive team, and
Mm,
to your point, deeply focus on client outcomes.
mm-hmm,
There's a very strong message from all leadership that client success is what counts, because if our clients succeed, we succeed.
mm,
So it's not about us, it's about our clients. And it's very much about how we can do what they need us to do for them. So it becomes highly customized, but that's entrepreneurial and that's deeply client focused.
yeah.
Uh, so go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, perhaps appropriately enough, since FPT has university, it has, as you suggest, a software division. It gets into a lot of different areas. The telco was very, very impressive, but the university side, the culture is very collegial, right? And
Mhm,
I've always liked that. I know in the data world, it's very much like that. It's very collegial. Even people who are my competitors are friends of mine, and we have no acrimony towards each other at all. You're just all working towards the same vision of trying to help your clients or trying to help educate people. And I really like that focus because when you have that collegial culture, people speak up. If you have this sort of top down hierarchical constructs, which have been around for a very long time,
mhm,
people down in the lower ranks are less willing to raise their hands and share ideas. And that's bad news, right? You want
mhm,
everyone to
mhm.
be able to have the psychological security to give their opinions and to give their ideas, right, Garth?
100%. Totally agree with that.
Yeah, yeah, that's good stuff. And let's bring in Harold Sinnott of Tech Ahead, one of the nicest guys I've met, and he's all over the world, folks. This guy is a true tech influencer, and you were there with me for the whole experience, which was absolutely fantastic. I mean, they really they put on an excellent show for us, but also open the
Mhm.
kimono and let us walk around and see the telco and see the offices and watch the people working and getting things done. I'm just very impressed by how uniform the culture is. And that's what a good culture does, right, Harold? If you have a good corporate culture, it shows through every single person who works for that company, right, Harold?
Yes, and first of all, yeah, it was a great experience to go there to Vietnam and to meet with such a great group of people. I mean, wonderful quality of human beings there. And and the group that we were together was, Eric, a great experience going with you. Was totally different without you. And I would say something that we noticed from the very first meeting that we had, the formal meeting with the board, with the Madam Chairman there, is that when she was trying to talk about the culture, she said that one of the goals of the vision was about happiness. And I think that you elaborated about that many times, because we're not talking only as we want to be just to earn money. We want just to be the first, and we want to be a culture of happiness. Now, that happiness is present everywhere. There is a huge discipline, I would say, on one side, but at the same time, they celebrate achievements. They celebrate people growing and growing and knowing. They celebrate that they are present. Their presence is in more than 20 countries nowadays, and also the experience when I mean, I had the pleasure also to have a one-on-one interview with Mr. Tran, the CEO of FPT Software, that is posted in my YouTube channel, by the way, Tech Ahead, as you very well mentioned. And there we talk about many things. We started saying, okay, there will be like a 5-10 minute conversation in camera. But finally, it was longer than that, almost 30 minutes. But after the interview, after we turn off the camera, we continued talking for 1 more hour. The passion that Mr. Tran demonstrated, all the stories that he was sharing about how they deal with customers, how they go into a new country, how they try to learn the language, but more than the language, the way that people communicate in each culture. That was amazing. And the other thing that I noticed, Eric, okay, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
The other thing is that I was impressed by the three dimensions the approach that they have. I mean, one is business transformation, when they try to align digital strategies with business objectives. And that is something that I would say is constant, is permanent. It's an approach that ensures that every technological advancement is not just an innovation, but a step towards business enhancement. That is constant. Then they see technology not as a goal, not as something that is as a final thing. Technology is an enabler. So as I mentioned, they have more than presence in 30 countries, and they use cutting edge technology, but also they use it to bridge the cultural and geographical gaps. And here was something that Mr. Tran mentioned to me, that they signed a big contract with Japan, in Japan. One, a digital transformation, big project. And when they got back to Vietnam, the pandemic and the lockdown started. And because of that, they were they continued working remotely, trying to understand the culture, meetings, and they succeed with that. And the third was people transformation. I mean, this is I would say, perhaps one of the most significant aspects of FPT software strategy. All FPT, they focus on people. They understand their technology, but they care about individuals. And this is a huge characteristic that is not only within the company, but also for the country. There is a sense of growing as a company and as a country in the technological arena, we say, that is very, very visible all the time.
Yeah, and that, I think if you think about corporate culture and where it comes from, it obviously comes from the leaders and from the founders of this country. And it's funny that you mentioned this, because it's perfectly aligned with my understanding of how the company was founded. That was the whole objective, is these 17 or 16 scientists came back from Moscow. They got their PhDs and they looked at each other. They said, we have got to do something to help our country. And so they focused on building out this company, this model, first focused on food and processing that you with technology. Now I think it stands for financing and promoting technology. Maybe they've changed the names because they've moved on and done bigger and better things. But the genesis of the company is the DNA, and it was this desire to help their country. They looked around, they saw a war-ravaged country that was still, in many ways, not advanced, not taking care, not taking advantage of new technologies, and they realized, hey, we've got to do something to help this country. And boy, now you look at it, I think I looked it up, it was like 1 or 2% of the GDP for the whole country is FPT.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
they've done, and it's interesting too because they are so diverse in where they focus. Telco, software development, retail, I think, is a big focus, in electronics. So it's like you've got this, horizontal development, but also vertical focus. Real quick, another 1 minute and 30 seconds from you, Harold. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is that, and connecting with what you're saying, the chairman of all the group, one of the founders, key founder. I mean, very humble, very, I mean, straight people, very, very human being. I mean, his human side was very all the time, very obvious, palpable. And he said, with that humble, that part characterizes his personality, that they didn't know anything about technology at the beginning. They wanted to do something. They wanted to create something, but they needed to learn that. Even if they had the master's, PhD degrees, that they needed to learn, because all these things that they started to implement were new technologies, new projects, and new companies. So they said they were trying to find every single book possible that they can read, that they could read, in order to implement those things that they learn. They bring it from ideas or into reality. And they did a good job of that. But he said, he didn't start saying, I remember the first day of the tech day, that great event that we also attended, saying that they started learning, doing something, wanted to do something good for the company, good for the people, good for the country. And there is that they were learning all the time, bringing also talented people, experts, to share their knowledge and to help them implement these new technologies. And
Yeah,
they
well,
really did a very good
it
job.
gets back to a collegial mindset, which is one of
Mhm.
learning, of listening, of paying attention. Yes, you have to teach people. Yes, you have to commit yourself to getting things done. But if you have that as a focus, as central to your DNA, that you want to learn and share, that's how you get these great cultures. And they've done it, and it's been going on for decades now. Well, folks, don't touch it at all. We're right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis, yours truly, Eric Kavanaugh, with an all-star cast of my friends who have worked with or for FPT Software out of Vietnam. Absolutely fascinating company, wonderful work ethic, very nice people, focused, caring, empathetic. I mean, I really can't say enough nice things about these folks. And the whole experience of going to Vietnam, too, is just very rewarding and just absolutely fascinating. But I did want to get into some of the uses of technology. So, Harold had mentioned in the last segment that the folks at FPT take a very open and methodical approach to leveraging technology. They view it as an enabler. Here in America, sometimes we view technology as the new shiny object. Everyone wants the new shiny object. But with FPT's case in particular, it's really viewed through the lens of how can I make a business better, or how can we make our clients' business better using these new tools? And obviously, AI is taking the world by storm right now, large language models. But I remember the chairman of FPT mentioned something at a press conference where he said, you know what's even more important for us than large language models are large visual models, LVMs as they're called. And you can think about the industrial use cases for these kinds of technologies. In the industrial world, yes, well, there are lots of photographs in the consumer world about life and baseball games and stuff like that. But in the business world, what you want are photographs of objects like carburetors and engines and turbines and all these other kinds of things. And he said that's going to be a big focus of theirs. And just in general, I know that optical character recognition, for example, is very, very powerful. And I'll bring in Scott Liniado again from Cox Automotive, an FPT client. And Scott, you have an interesting use case around titles, right? And using OCR for title recognition and processing. Tell us that story.
Yeah, so we have quite a lot of titles at Cox Automotive. We touch a vast majority of vehicles in the United States in some way, shape, or form. And our old title processing system that was doing the OCR was getting about 50%, confirmation rate, and then say, okay, we need a human to look at it and fill in some fields. We partnered with FPT to overhaul that, and we launched it recently. The end user experience, though, is what I want to talk about because we launched it and everyone's waiting for, okay, I'm going to get the exceptions like I usually do. And a day went by and they asked, is it broken? Because we haven't gotten any. And we said, no, actually it's working because we boosted it up to 98%. So the human in the loop intervention just went down tremendously. So that's real value that we saw, to our end users, to our business users. But that kind of automation, Eric, I think is kind of what you're talking about. If you can get it to the point where there's just the tiniest exceptions that are flowing through versus, having, okay, every other one you have to do something. It's a big difference for us.
Yeah, well, it's also a morale booster, right, Scott? And I can tell you, I know, like, I remember learning about IoT when we were in Italy years ago for a rollout of Trenitalia's first ever fully instrumented train. And we were talking about predictive maintenance and how important predictive maintenance is. And it dawned on me immediately in the old days of maintenance, and in this case of OCR, you just go through this rote process of checking this and checking that like you always do, and you rarely find anything that's different. It's just kind of the same old, same old. Well, your awareness goes down. But when you only get one alert instead of 50, you're going to focus on that alert. So I bet you even the percentage that were manually adjusted, we're probably showing a higher accuracy rate than before. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, and we're looking at that kind of technology for all kinds of other use cases across, automotive. This is just the tip of the iceberg for us.
Yeah, and Garth, I'll throw it over to you. A lot of times the tasks that machine learning and AI will tackle are tasks that are needed at scale. So you're talking many, many, many instances of something, and they're usually things that, yeah, a human can do, but does a human really want to do that? I mean, scanning through 10,000 documents to find the ones with data in the wrong fields, that's not a fun job. Like, and you're going to get bored, you're going to get worn out. Tedium is just a disaster. It's no fun at all, and it affects quality is my biggest point, right? So the fact that you can use these technologies to hammer away at really important but tedious tasks that really should be right. You don't have a lot of margin for error in these things. That's a win-win-win across the board, right, Garth?
Oh, 100%, yes. What's interesting about this example was we went through the effort kind of post the LLMs, the ChatGPTs, etc. And it's not an LLM. It's classic, it's old-fashioned machine learning,
Right.
uh, where,
The best
where
kind.
where you teach the models where to find the right pieces and how to get the data, format it correctly, take the fuzziness out, turn characters around as necessary. So there's a lot of work we did with the Cox team on going through their titles database. I mean, OCR gathers the data. It's the intelligence to put it in the right place.
Mhm.
That is lacking generally in that area. And to your point, picking up the errors at 50% is tedious. It's a lot of people time, and these two serious inaccuracies. Not to mention time delays. When you're moving a series of vehicles through a auction, you really have to be very quick on capturing so that the buyer can buy it and take it away. And without that information, they can't do that. So a real business challenge to fix.
Mhm.
But yeah, the team working with the models, working with the data was able to produce tremendous results
Well, and
very
yeah,
successfully.
I'm glad you brought up the old-fashioned AI, right? Because it's funny, there's so much attention now on ChatGPT and large
Mhm.
language models, which are by design probabilistic in nature,
Correct.
because they're taking language, they're converting it to mathematical values, and then converting it back to language. Well, anytime you do that, it's a bit of a lossy process. You're going to lose a little bit of accuracy. And what you want in many use cases is to increase the accuracy. You don't
Correct.
want to take a chance. I just submitted a talk for a conference next year where I asked a question rhetorically, what part of your business can be wrong 5 to 10% of the time? And not too much of your business can be wrong
Not
five
too
to ten
much of
percent of
that.
the
No.
time. And they were talking about basically, I went to another conference where one of the chief researchers said that, look, to be completely candid, almost all of the high quality LLM implementations we've seen have been internally focused for decision
Mhm,
support, basically. In other words, not
mhm.
externally focused to customers, clients, and prospects. No, internal, because then the person working can make a decision. They can look at this and say, it's suggesting this, but I'm going to do that because I'm pretty
Mhm.
sure that's the right course of action. So I say all of this to focus attention on old-fashioned AI, folks. We got a whole bunch of stuff right years ago, and that's the kind of thing we're using in this particular use case, right, Garth?
Absolutely, and it's important to realize AI, the ML piece of AI is relatively new and a fairly small piece of it. There's a lot of other things that we can do in terms of the work we did with this particular example, not to mention automation, to take out the mundane tasks and focus on the value-added tasks.
Hmm.
Takes the mundane work away and makes it more accurate, etc., etc. ML is very cool, but I agree with you. It's a very interesting and still somewhat error-prone technology at this point in time.
Yeah, right. And Harold, I'll throw it over to you to comment on. You're like me, you follow the tech industry. There are fads, there are waves of interest, and then after the peak of hype falls, you go to the trough of disillusionment. I think that was the Gartner
Mm,
concept, and then you got to
correct, yeah.
crawl back up to where you want to be. Old AI is like that. There's a lot of really good old-fashioned AI out there, and the key for businesses is to focus on what makes sense for your business. So I'm personally hopeful that the excitement around ChatGPT, and I use Gemini myself and some of these
Mhm.
others, will help heighten awareness around the power of AI, but that people will keep in perspective that there are old ways of doing things. And in business, if something works and it works well, you leave it alone, right? What do you think, Harold?
Absolutely. Now we are in the explosion, in the time of an explosion of knowledge of about AI. I mean, now it's massive. Now it's popular. I mean, a few years ago, we were talking about AI, but now it's everybody. Now our families, friends, communities, politics, everywhere. And everywhere, also on anywhere, you can find a new app every day for doing something. I mean, videos, audios, accounting, marketing, whatever. And every day we are bombarded with new, because we are in this time of an explosion. It's like a volcano that is of excitement and creativity, and also uh, implementing. I mean, new. I mean, the strong competition for with the applications and for new applications. Now, I totally agree with you. I think we are going to come to a moment that we're going to settle a little bit more, using more of these tools, yes, but more focus on I mean, in being productive and being efficient always, and but not just as a fancy new thing that we
Right,
can
right,
be learning and creating all the time, as it is
right,
now. So in many places,
right.
and particularly because it's massive, it's popular. Everybody can have access to any AI application.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly grabbed the imagination of boardrooms, and to your point, consumers, everybody's using that stuff. So I hope that it translates into a focus on getting things done. And, Scott, I'll throw it back over to you. As a client of FPT, you want outcomes. You want things to work. You want ideas about how to do them. And then you want to be able to hand it off and just know that it gets done. And that is what I found also very compelling about the FPT culture is it's very focused on efficiency and getting things done and making sure things have
Yes.
gotten done, which actually, interestingly enough, is one cool benefit of AI to notice things that you missed, right? If you can point it at a certain
Mhm.
task set or workflow, human beings forget things. We're imperfect creatures, so we shouldn't expect technology to be perfect either. But I've found that AI can be very good at suggesting things and pointing out when you missed something. What do you think?
I'd agree. Actually, I'm going to jump back to something you just were talking about in terms of traditional machine learning. One thing that we use really often is um, pricing. So
Mm.
we do a lot of pricing of vehicles as an example, but it's all traditional ML. All right, and FBT helps us with that. It's all about the data we're collecting. It's all about leveraging that data. So I was mentioning earlier, we have a lot of automotive transactions. We touch a large number of vehicles through our auctions as an example. But then you have a partner with FPT. We have our internal data science groups. You can come up with those accurate prices without that guesswork you're talking about. Because I don't want a generative price.
No, you don't.
I don't want to click the button and every time I click it, I get a different price. And it's the same price. And we even walk through, okay, this is why it is this price. We're adjusting this much for the color. We're adjusting this much for the condition, all of those things. So I just wanted to hit on that point again, because it's something we can lose sight of pretty easily, that 98%. You got to get up in that accuracy level, especially with the internal tools, but with the external ones, like this pricing I'm talking about, it has to be way above that.
Right. No, that's right. I mean, there are deterministic systems and probabilistic systems. And deterministic systems like, I don't know, accounting, for example, you want to make sure that is very, very accurate. How much I paid the company. None of those systems are going to be run by Gen AI anytime soon, probably never, to be completely blunt. We're going to have more of these sort of hybrid searches, I think, coming out where you leverage the best of both worlds. And that really is the best case scenario. But I do really hear what you're telling me about old-fashioned regression models, finding patterns in data using various algorithms like random forest and k-means has always been one of my favorites, separating things by disparity. There are lots of interesting things you can do with AI. The key, and I'll throw it over to Garth, you got about 2 minutes left in this segment. The key is always to understand, what are we trying to do as a business? Then what assets do we have? What are the resources like people and data and technologies that we've already bought? And then how can we leverage perhaps something new to accomplish those business objectives? And that's another thing that impressed me about the culture there is they know we're here to work for Cox Automotive or to work for some other client, and that's their mindset, and that's where they go. What do you think, Garth?
I 100% agree with that. Yes, totally. The focus on client success. It's not our success; it's client success. Client successful, so are we. We go back to some of your comments on the assets. To be effective in any of the AI realms, you have to have good data. Data needs to be well governed in the right place with the right structures, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of companies are thinking about what they could do, but they've got to cross that hurdle first, which does certainly make it interesting and somewhat more challenging as to how they plan to proceed. But the final element of that is, and it's something Harold spoke about, and it's something that we all talk about a lot. It's, technology is an enabler. It's not the end solution.
Right.
It enables the outcome. But having those other assets in place, people are a very important piece of that asset set. But using it in such a fashion that you drive business results, coming up with an interesting machine learning set of rules, algorithms behind the data from the OCR system wouldn't have done much good if it didn't solve the problem.
Right. Right. And
So,
again, those numbers are off the charts. I mean, I love
indeed.
that story, Scott, that people were like, is it broken? I'm not getting any results. It's like, no, it's working extremely well. That's the kind of aha moment you want, is when someone, is this broken? No, it's actually almost perfect. Right. That's when clients are happy, directors are happy, the board is happy, everyone's happy. Well, folks, don't touch that. I'll be right back with our fascinating show on FPT and the Vietnamese culture in the Silicon Delta. You're listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis with an all-star cast. Garth Hamilton from FPT, Harold Sinnott from Tech Ahead. Harold, I'm glad you got a brand, buddy. That's good. It used to be just Harold, the influencer. I'm like, you need a brand. You need like a company name to reference. And so
You're
Tech
right.
Ahead, he listens. See, Harold listens. He's one of these smart guys. He listens. And Scott Liniado from Cox Automotive. And Scott, I just want to talk about the importance of work ethic and getting things done. And one thing I love about these large language models is they're so adorable. They're like interns that never complain. Right, like you get a task and it just does the task. You say, "Oh no, that was wrong." They go, "Oh, I'm sorry," and then they do it right. Like they never. I know that's baked into the sort of dialectic, if you will, or the lexicon of the actual machine that's doing it. But let's face it, what you want is people working for you who will do what you ask them to do. They may raise their hand and say, hey, you could do it this way, you could do it that way, point things out. You also want that for sure, because people on the front lines, they know what it's like to do some task. But you don't want sass. You don't want someone talking back at you or, trying to pull some nonsense. And that's one thing I noticed about the culture over in Vietnam is I didn't get any of that stuff. And you can get, I won't say which cultures you will find it, but people know that there are some environments where, maybe you ask your team to do something and they're just difficult about it. I don't get that. But maybe tell me from your experience what it's like working with a team that is far across the planet, like literally on the other side of the planet. How does that work and what are your tricks of the trade, if you will?
So I'm going to agree with you. You can't get much farther away. So we're here in Atlanta, and it is far. And if you're working across that kind of a time zone difference, you need to adjust how you're working. One of the first things that FET did when we started this partnership in 2020 is they came in and built out a whole knowledge base on the products they were taking over. Because we're talking over 1,000 people, dozens of teams, dozens of
Wow.
products, right? So they came in, they had actually a whole team of folks coming in to document the solutions and build kind of a whole onboarding modules. So it's not surprising if we talk about FET University that they would do something like that. But it allowed us to build the expertise from the engineers, but also longer term, and this is the second phase of it really, we were able to even build product owners that sat offshore.
Wow.
Yeah, so for me, you got to go back to the tenets of Scrum, right? You always want a co-located full team. And first we had some offshore Scrum Masters and offshore product owners. Then we said, wait a minute, the Scrum Master should really sit with the team. And so, the product owner should sit with the team also. You know what, maybe we should do what Scrum suggests and have the whole team sit together. And that's when we started to get the best productivity. We even put together whole modules just for that product owner training. And the big thing that we had to do is actually bring them to the United States. And you said this earlier when you're talking about the motorbikes in Vietnam. They actually, as you're driving, they kind of go around people and cars like schools of fish. It's kind of crazy.
Right.
But there's not a car culture like there is in America.
Right.
So we had to bring people over and say, look, let's bring you out to a dealership in America.
Interesting.
Yeah, you want to actually see how this works. How does the process work of buying a vehicle? How does it work when you're turning it back in at the end? How does a used car manager go about their day? But these things are hugely important for us so that we have autonomous teams offshore that are not waiting for us to get in the next day. They're
Right.
taking larger direction from us and really innovating. When you walk around that floor, you have teams that are able to connect with each other, as representatives of Cox Automotive, not just, an outsourced vendor or a real partner.
That's fascinating. And Garth, I'll throw it over to you. Something else I noticed, and this is what you want with a partner, is someone who takes the initiative. Now, you don't want them to take too much initiative and go off in some other direction, but it sounds to me like they took the initiative to build out the modules. Okay, this is what we're going to be focused on. Let's start learning about that, such that our first meetings will be very productive. That's just a wonderful client relationship where you've got a vendor who is thinking through what they're going to do and they're asking questions and they're ready to go. Right, Garth? Go ahead.
No, 100%, yes. When we started out the program, as Scott mentioned, as COVID struck us, right? So it became really interesting because a lot of the tenets of how you work across the 12-hour time zone is you co-locate for a season. People travel both ways. You make sure there's enough face time to overcome any of the cultural or language concerns, and you build relationships. And that's really how a lot of that play works. Being completely unable to do that raised a lot of really interesting challenges for both sides. The Cox team, as Scott mentioned, went from about 200 down to 3 in terms of vendors. So that was a culture change for them. That was a very interesting operational change because a lot of those 200 were on-site people. So a lot of the teams weren't using an offshore model. So we had to team to make sure we could explain how to do the offshore piece. We also had to work with our team to make sure we overcame the challenges of working with a team that wasn't used to it. And we also had to overcome the fact that we were not really able to spend time face to face. So a lot of use of teams, a lot of gathering of information, a lot of building out this knowledge base, which the team did. It was obviously a priority as we started,
Right.
was to build a knowledge base so we could onboard others, so we could ramp quickly. I don't believe we could have ramped 1,200 people in what was actually about 13 and a half months if we
Wow.
hadn't had that base in place for the team
Yeah.
to learn. So when they walked into their first KT session with the Cox guys, they had enough knowledge of how to put itself together, what the processes were, how they were doing a scaled agile, et cetera, so that they were intelligent enough to have a conversation, and it wasn't starting from cold. Certainly for the KT, for the Cox teams, there was a key effort of enabling that 12-hour time zone operation.
Yeah. Well, and Scott, I'm always thinking about these things, and I assume something. You can tell me if it's true, but I'm pretty sure about this. If you get it right, it's just the night shift, right? So it's like we work all day, you hand off a bunch of stuff, they work all our night, you come in, a whole bunch of stuff is done. I mean, if you get that right, it's just like a humdinger, right?
If you get it wrong, what happens is they're waiting, and then they're
Right.
waiting again, and they're waiting again. If you get it right, it is the actual fall of the sun, just like you just described. I mean, the
Yeah.
payoff is huge when you can make it work, but it requires that investment, right? So you have a team that can really make decisions without you, that has the resources to understand the business problems. But if they get into their day and they're 2 hours in, they're like, oh, we have a question. Well, let's wait till tomorrow.
Yeah.
It just it burns the whole flow of what they're trying to do. But we do have things like overlap when it comes to talking to, hey, they can check in with their product manager every day.
Hmm.
So there are certain things that we have done, like that product owner offshore has a little overlap. They get to check in, report back on progress. But if you're relying on like, hey, every day we're going to do a stand up with the US, it gets really tough because
Mhm.
of those time zones. But uh, inevitably, what you come up with more durable teams and more innovation because they're able to really understand that business problem, what we're trying to achieve, versus following instructions. I
Right.
think we want to get away from that where they're really trying to go out against business outcomes and delivering business value, not doing the mechanics of a particular story.
Yeah, right. You want it to be more declarative as opposed to imperative. And that's the little programmer's joke, right?
Yes.
Declarative, just for those who don't know, declarative is when you tell the application, I want this outcome, and then it figures out how to do that. Imperative is where you say, okay, do A, then do B, then do C, then do D. And even though you can get it right with imperative, and there are many use cases for imperative programming, nonetheless, if you want to optimize something and you want to come up with new ways of doing things, it's more important to be declarative. To say, I want 100 customers by the end of next month, for example. And these are the rules of engagement that you can use. Here are the resources that you have. So you don't want to constrain your team too much, but you don't want to constrain them not at all, basically. You want them to have some guiding principles. And it really gets down to articulating the business objectives. And Harold, I'll throw it over to you. That's not the easiest thing in the world to do. We got 1 minute left, real quick on this segment. Thoughts on the importance of articulating clearly what you want?
Yeah, something that I noticed all the time when we were in Vietnam is the people that were engaged and committed in a way that is not common to see everywhere. I remember many years ago, I was a consultant on the Panama Canal, the authority of the Panama Canal. So I spent there some time with the leadership team, with workshops, whatever. And I noticed there was a sense of creating history. It's
Hmm.
not only making projects, not only getting, I mean the results, creating history, and that is the sense that I saw in Vietnam. I mean they have that sense of educating, yes, learning, implementing, and creating history not only for Vietnam but for the region also, and for the
Hmm.
technologies that they are developing. That's why
Yeah.
they are teaching AI from the primary school, from elementary school, and they have 4 campuses, and that we visit, I think, at least one of them, of those, and they were, I mean, it's great. The other thing, they
Well, yeah, let's
never close. Yeah,
yeah,
sorry.
let's pick this up out of the break, folks. We'll be right back. You're listening to Inside
Yes,
Analysis.
sorry for that. Yeah.
All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis. What a fantastic show talking to Garth Hamilton of FPT, Harold Sinnott of Tech Ahead, and Scott Liniado of Cox Automotive. And we're just talking about this whole ecosystem that FPT has developed over in Vietnam and around the world. And they are competing with China and India and Eastern Europe and all these other countries that want business in America and Western Europe and other places. And of course, they're becoming a center of gravity all unto themselves and doing a pretty darn good job of it. But I do want to talk about this holistic approach that they have where they focus on schools and universities. And, I've long believed that if you want to be happy in the long term in life, you have to do things that you find enjoyable, that are aligned with your personality. You got to do sort of a Venn diagram of what do I like doing, what can make me money, and what can I do? What am I skilled at doing? And if you find that little sweet spot in the middle, you're going to be just fine. And maybe Garth, I'll throw it over to you first. The fact that FPT has these universities is great from a business perspective because number one, they can pay attention to who's good at which sorts of tasks. Some people are very good at management. Other people are very good at coding. The point being, personalities are different, and you're going to be enjoying your work more if you're aligned with something that is aligned with your personality. And you can learn that if you watch these kids go all through school, understand that you'll change too at some point in time. You may want to move into management as you get older. But I just think it's really interesting that they have this holistic approach, and that's got to be good for business. What do you think, Garth?
Oh, it's great for business. And I would say we are the only vertically integrated provider out there. And when I say that, Equity University, it's about 60,000 students strong. In terms of, and it's a STEM university, focused on STEM university. We hire, I think, the top 20 or 25% of the students into FPT, into FPT software. That allows us to drive rapid growth, tremendous scale, as well as keep abreast of current and emerging tech. So, the kids come up and they've been taught the right things. We do also do things where we would actually put in place programs that are relevant to clients' needs. We have a whole program on embedded chip computing, because about 10, 15 years ago, there was not many of those skills out there. So we spew out those and we use them on our clients to a large extent. The other really interesting element of this is that we locate the university campuses close to our offices. And when you get to second and third year, you actually get to go work on our client projects as interns.
That's awesome.
So when they graduate from their 4 years, they've actually had work experience being consultants. And it enables tremendous value for our clients in being able to bring those relevant technologies, but as well as to enable growth, as well as to provide resilience to the team. We are able to put in shadow programs, and if someone needs to move to a different place, we have those skills in play and easily available for our clients. So it's a tremendous enabler for our business.
Yeah, that really is so important. And, Scott, I'll throw it over to you, and then Harold, hopefully have another minute left. It is a young country. I don't know what the average age is, but there are a lot of young people. And I tell you what, if you energize your youth as part of a country's culture and you imbue them with technology and learning and collaboration and consulting, and you really focus on fostering these kinds of journeys for individuals and for groups, that's really good stuff. And you mentioned that, the average age of person is about 27, which is really good because they're still very much young and energized about things, and they're not so set in their ways about how to do things. And I'll tell you what, if there were ever a time to not be set in your ways about how to do things, that time is right now with the power of AI. What do you think, Scott?
With a workforce as large as ours, so having over 1,000 people, the talent pipeline is hugely important to us. So knowing that this university is there and it's got such an engaged student base, I'll tell you, I went out to visit FPT University in February, and we went to the main campus in Hanoi. And one of the first things that we saw when we went is there's a statue of the self-made man chiseling himself out of the statue. It was the person taking us around was so enthusiastic about it all, but also really wanted to hit home that point several times we went around, is they provide that curriculum to allow them to make the most of themselves. And I think it's emblematic of what Vietnam is doing as a country, right? So transforming, and actually I have a little thing here, a cutter here is the digital farmer.
Oh, wow.
that I was given by FPT's chairwoman, Ha. Uh, it's um, it's just a testament to how they have moved the economy in Vietnam over these years. Also hit one more thing that you mentioned earlier, Eric, the music. They also
Yeah.
have, as I walked around, martial arts happening
Very
throughout the
awesome.
campus. There were several
Yes.
areas.
Yes, but there's
Yes.
both are mandatory for all students. Mhm.
Yes.
That's right.
So it's just great to see they're really well rounded. And the final one, I don't want to forget this. Football, very big, not American football, but
Right.
soccer as is known
Yeah.
here. I mean, on the campus as well as at the actual ODCs, the offshore delivery centers that we've
Yeah.
got. They're playing. They have teams that are associated with our groups, but the culture really makes a big difference, I think.
Yeah, it does. And I just did some quick research here. $408 billion was the GDP in 2022. And last year, FPT did, what was it, like 3 billion or 4 billion almost?
Just between 2 and 3, 2.7, 2 point something like that.
Yeah. So not quite 1% of GDP, but for any company to be 1% of the country's GDP, that's pretty impressive. Well, Harold Sinnott of Tech Ahead, we got 90 seconds left. What are your final thoughts?
Perfect. I mean, we were talking about education, about the culture. We're talking about the university. They have 5 campuses. We visit one of those. There was a big bell that you might remember, Eric, that
Yes,
we were
I loved it.
knocking the. Yeah, that was beautiful because it was for meditation, and they put an accent also. Everybody do martial arts. Everybody learns English as a second language. So they cultivate a culture of knowledge, of constant learning. So
Right.
on one side, that is very strong. They're very strong in education and sharing knowledge. The other side, the ecosystem of partnership that they have is huge. I mean, in terms of collaborations, they have strategic collaboration agreements with IBM, SAP, Microsoft, Amazon Web Services, also Salesforce, and they are part of an alliance with an AI alliance with IBM, and I mean the initiative was from IBM and Meta. So that means they are very active globally in trying to bring the knowledge, bring the technology, implement new things based on the common knowledge and that we have and we can have in this business ecosystem of partnerships.
I love it. This has been wonderful stuff. And folks, hop online. I wrote an article about my experience going over their happiness, the ultimate metric for business and life. It's good stuff. Big thanks to Garth Hamilton and Scott Liniado and Harold Sinnott and all the folks at FPT for all their help. And for that trip last year, it was fantastic. Hop online, look these folks up, FPT, and look at that. Perfect timing. We'll talk to you next time, folks. You've been listening to Inside Analysis.